So good morning, everyone. Bienvenue. I welcome you to our session on legal life skills for job seekers, a curriculum for adult learners. My name is Christina Brusalis, and I work with Community Legal Education Ontario, which is also known as CLEO. I'm really happy to have been invited here to give you some information about the legal life skills activity kits that my organization, CLEO, has developed for adult learners and literacy instructors. I'd like to start off by saying that I have tremendous respect for the work that you are doing helping people to gain basic literacy skills. Through the course of this project, it's been my privilege to work with and hear from instructors both in the GTA and in Eastern and Northern Ontario. Their work and their feedback that they gave us from their learners has been really helpful in shaping the activity kits. In fact, I have to admit that it's quite intimidating to be presenting to a whole group of teachers such as yourself, so I have no pedagogical experience whatsoever. Please bear with me. I should start off by providing a roadmap for today's session. I'll first give some brief background about who CLEO is, why we decided to develop these kits, and how we hope they'll be used. And then I'm going to pretend to be a teacher for a couple of exercises and lead you through part of one of the kits. So now I have a question for you. Who here has heard of CLEO? Raise a show of hands. Good. So I'm glad I can let you all know about us and the materials that we produce. Let me tell you a bit more about us. CLEO is a specialty community legal clinic that produces public legal education and information content, or what we call PLE, in print and online. We've been around for over 40 years now. My boss likes to say that CLEO wears multiple hats. First, we are specialists in the field of PLE. Second, we are, most of us, experts in writing plain language. Me, not so much. I think I'm quite clear, but not plain. Three, we are part of the Community Legal Clinic and Legal Aid System in Ontario. Most of our work is funded by Legal Aid Ontario. And four, we are part of the social justice sector in Ontario. We have two core mandates. One is to reach people across Ontario with plain language legal information about their rights and obligations, and our materials are primarily targeted to marginalized or low literacy people. And two, we also help community and legal organizations in Ontario improve their capacity to develop and deliver effective PLE in their communities. And finally, a little bit about me. I like to joke that I'm a recovering lawyer. I started off in the sector as a tenant advocate, managing a tenants' rights hotline in Toronto, which fielded about 20,000 calls a year. So that was fun. Sometimes. From there, I ended up working on the front lines for a dozen years as a lawyer in various community legal clinics, mostly in the Toronto area, and mostly in the areas of landlord-tenant and social assistance law. For about 7 years, I was actually a frontline lawyer at the Landlord and Tenant Board, where people go to get evicted, unfortunately. So we were often the first line of contact that people who are facing eviction had with any legal assistance. So it was very rewarding work, and many of our clients were marginalized, such as I believe many of the people you work with are. So it had its challenges, but it was good work. I did, however, leave the front lines about 4 years ago to join CLEO. I work with their Center for Research and Innovation. I don't think too many people know about the work that CLEO does in terms of research. So we conduct research on access to justice issues for marginalized people, and we use that research to develop tools for community workers, such as the kits I'm here to talk about today. Right now I'm going to circulate, I have one full package of all of the kits that we have to date, and if you guys want to pass them around, that would be great. You've also been given a couple samples in front of you there. So let me turn to that. What are legal life skills anyway? We at CLEO define these as the knowledge, the skills, and the personal characteristics or circumstances, or what other people call resources, that people need in order to recognize and deal with legal problems in their lives. Research in my sector has shown that almost half of Canadians will experience at least one family or civil law problem within a 3-year period. And poor or marginalized people, such as the learners you work with, are more likely to face multiple or intersecting legal problems at once. I'm pretty sure you're aware of that phenomenon. But I'll just give you a short example of an intersecting legal problem. So I got fired wrongfully from my job. I may have to take some time to find out what I can do about that legally. I may have some recourses down the road. However, as you all know, the legal system is quite slow and it can take time to work things out. So in the meantime, I might end up in the situation where, because I'm not employed, I don't have enough money to pay my rent, and therefore I end up facing eviction for non-payment of rent. Or I might get into consumer law problems because I'm not able to pay other bills and I start getting collectors chasing after me. So these problems become compounded by the fact that many people who have civil law problems don't actually understand that their problems are legal. The studies have shown that many people view some types of legal problems as simply bad luck or as social problems. Also, people who rely on government services such as welfare might view legal problems connected to that as simply a necessary evil of dealing with the bureaucracy. So what this means, and what we've learned from research and from speaking with people, is that people in this situation often don't realize that there might be practical or legal steps that they can take to deal with the problem. In my sector in recent years, there's been a notion that it's possible to prevent legal problems from arising altogether. In fact, I was originally recruited by CLEO to conduct research on health literacy practices in the community health sector to see if we could learn anything to help our client base prevent legal problems. We ended up concluding that prevention of legal problems is not always realistic for marginalized or poor people, particularly because a lot of that involves having money to sort things out or to hire lawyers. However, we do believe that marginalized people can acquire certain knowledge or skills to protect themselves in the event that they face problems. So from our research, one recommendation we made was to build on existing life skills training programs targeting vulnerable communities, to incorporate legal capability components in those programs. Legal capability is a big fancy term, and the current buzzword in my sector for what we are calling legal life skills and what has historically been called legal literacy. I won't bore you with the shift to calling it legal capability. It has to do with some research from the UK years ago, and anyway, if you're interested, you can email me and I'll let you know all about it. So in our research, many of the other recommendations we made were very high level and would require systemic change in the justice system, would require money and other things way beyond our control. However, this was one recommendation we thought we could act on. So we decided to design the kits that I'm here to discuss today. We've designed these materials because we know that the programs that you offer are practical and hands-on. Our thinking and our hope was that your students are more receptive than many people for this level of information because they're already in learning mode. Our idea from the outset was to help equip adult learners with employment-related information to detect situations that could lead to legal problems or to cope with legal problems that might arise in their future workplace. So that is, it's not substantive legal information, but it's practical information that should help them both in the workplace and we hope outside the workplace in terms of organizational skills and whatnot. We developed and piloted 4 kits in 2016 on the following topics. Organizing information, and this is one of the kits I've given you in your package and that we'll be working with a bit today. Putting things in writing, keeping documents and records, and how to find good legal information online. And here's a little anecdote on how instructors' input really improved these kits. When I first did the draft of the keeping documents records piece, I had designed this crazy, intricate filing system that you wouldn't find in a Bay Street law firm, and was suggesting to adult learners, yeah, this is how you should organize. You should have file folders, and you should have file cabinets and everything else. And I met with the instructors after they'd reviewed this. Like, Christina, do you actually organize your stuff like that at home yourself? And I'm like, no. So they gave me the very excellent tip, for example, that as long as people know the basic thing, they need to keep things in one place. If they have a drawer in their home, if they have a shoebox under their bed, that's it. Anything more is gravy, right? And so I took that to heart, and I really needed that practical input from people on the ground. It's been a while since I've worked directly with clients, so you tend to forget things. It's okay. So we are currently piloting another introductory kit, Legal Problems of Everyday Life. I've provided that one to you as well. And I'll be touching upon one piece of information in that. We developed that kit based on feedback from our pilot instructors. And in November of this year, we're going to be piloting another kit called Dealing with Inappropriate Questions or Comments. This was a topic also suggested by pilot instructors. They reported to us that they often hear from learners who have attended job interviews and come back saying, hey, they asked me a question, I'm not sure whether it was legal or not for them to ask, like, do I have kids? Where was I born? These types of questions that give people kind of a gut unease, but they weren't clear, did I have to answer that question or not? Short answer to that is, it's tricky, but so it's been an interesting piece to work on, but hopefully we at least alert people to the types of questions that employers may or may not ask. So the first 4 kits in the series are finalized at present and available for their use, for your use if you think they would be useful. I'm going to circulate a sheet of paper, and I'm happy to email the full set to anyone who wants it. We're not able to publish online all the 6 kits until the spring of 2018 because we're waiting clearance from our funder, the people who kindly pay for this project. I have to give them a plug. It's the Canadian Bar Association.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Can I ask you a question? What is the time frame for a kit? So when you were piloting it, is it a couple of days or a week, or what were you using as a time frame?
We gave, so we worked with 8 instructors in the Toronto area. We gave them the series of 4 kits and basically let them make those decisions. The pilot period was over October and November of last year. And my understanding is all of the instructors used the kits in very different ways. Like some took some pieces and not others. Some instructed the whole series as it was originally intended.
I was just wondering the time frame for a kit. Like,
for one kit, I think the time slots they were looking at were about between 1.5 and 2 hours.
oh, okay.
And some would have taken sort of hived off pieces from a kit to make it shorter. Thank you for asking that. And actually that leads into what I was going to say. So there is no right way to use these kits. We had an original sort of sequence in mind, which was thrown to the winds once we started actually speaking with instructors. The people who have worked with them report using them in several different ways. So some have used the stories and questions that we present in the kits as a jumping off point to open discussions rather than strictly going through the exercises. Some created their own quizzes and puzzles based on the materials, which is outside my personal skill set, I would say, at this point, although maybe I'll learn. So we would encourage you and your students to use the kits in whatever way you see fit and what works best for the group of people you're working with. I should mention also that they are intended for a more advanced learner level. Our original thinking on this, based on what we knew about adult education principles, is that the information will be more useful the closer you got to the workplace. So the language level is probably not too suitable for entry-level learners. And it's not being vetted by our clear language experts, unfortunately, because they are too busy producing information for people. But anyway, based on feedback from instructors who are working with these kits, we hope down the road to create a simplified version of some of the content, which will be suitable for use with entry-level learners as well. And wrapping up this part, but before I put on my teacher hat, let me take the chance to plug Clio's English as a Second Language kits for anybody who knows ESL instructors or who works with the ESL learners. They were designed for ESL learners at all levels, and they do contain substantive legal information on workers' rights issues and also tenants' rights issues. There's a flyer in the little colored folder I've provided you that has information on the topics that they cover and where to find them online. They're all downloadable in PDF format, and they've been around for some time. Questions?
Are you thinking of having all this translated in French?
We hope to, and in future. We do not have the resources at present, but if I'd be happy to speak with you more about how we could get that accomplished. It wouldn't happen until next year at the earliest.
Thank you.
Would the ESL be suitable for entry level?
Yes, it's my understanding. They're from level 1 to 6, I believe. You'll see, if you look at the flyer, you'll see the list of topics and grade levels. I am not so familiar with that sector, but they were designed by an ESL instructor in conjunction with Clio staff.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
Any other questions at the moment? Okay. So I'm going to circulate this sheet if people are interested in hearing from me. And don't worry, I won't sign you up for any extra emails. Although if you want extra emails from Clio, I put a little handwritten box at the end and you can check that off. And I'll get that info to our outreach team. So I'd like to mention briefly before I begin something. If you can pick up the kit called Legal Problems of Everyday Life. I don't know if you all have copies. Some of you may have to share. I think we were a couple short. And if you turn to page 9 of that kit, it's called Taking a Legal Health Checkup. I wanted to mention this concept only because it fits in quite well with this sort of notion of preventing or staving off legal problems. And there is presently an online tool that you could maybe use to work through with your students to help them sort of understand what might turn into a legal problem down the road. Like if I lose my job, is that a legal problem? If I get a notice from my landlord, those sorts of things. So the Halton Community Legal Clinic designed this legal health check tool to use in conjunction with some research they're doing and also some direct outreach using community workers to help people detect when they're at risk of having a legal problem. I'm sorry because I'm a bit of a Luddite and I wasn't sure about the AV facilities here. I can't actually show it to you, but I've provided you with the web link to that checkup and it's on page 10. So the checkup basically takes the person through a series of questions on about 8 different topics of law, including education, housing, social assistance, pensions, employment, etc. I believe family as well. Some of the instructors I worked with previously really liked this tool to work with their students, to take them through one by one. I will caution up front, their questionnaire is very lengthy, although people don't have to select every category. And it's only because they're using it to inform research around legal needs as well, so they didn't want people to have any opt-out points. They wanted to learn sort of the whole situation of the person. So we're right now in the process of designing a similar tool which would have more opt-outs and which would actually hopefully spit out a personalized tip sheet at the end for the person. So they would, if they were able to give us their demographic information, and that would all be in a secure system, then they would get a little memo at the end saying, okay, you're having a problem with your landlord, here's where you call, here's where you can look online, that sort of thing. So that's just a little heads up for future. And as I say, you may find it helpful to work with the present Halton tool with your learners. The Canadian Bar Association also has a bunch of checklists on more generic, well, there's some regarding youth. They're not intended for lower income people necessarily. So there's stuff on wills and estates. You might even find some of the content useful yourself in your personal life. And in the text box on page 9, you'll see links to those resources as well. Any more questions before I carry on? Here's the part at which I show you what a poor teacher I am, and you will also note with my sentence strips how badly I use scissors. They didn't teach me that in law school.
You ought to see me, I'm left-handed.
Oh dear, I need one of those. So I think we have about, the session ends at 12, correct? So we have about maybe about 45 minutes to go through some of this information here. I don't know that we'll get through the entire kit, although this is one of the shorter ones, but I'd like to leave some time at the end for questions or comments as well, so if that's okay with the room. And I'm sorry I forgot to bring chocolates for you to keep you waiting. Next time. Okay, so I'll turn you to page 2 of the organizing and prioritizing information. And I hope this doesn't seem like too artificial an exercise. I just thought it might be fun for you to see how these things work in action. I'll note up front, you'll see a reference at the top to another kit keeping documents and records. So these are also still a work in progress, and now we're going to have to remove some of these sort of references to other kits. But for my purpose, this dovetails quite well with the documents and records kit that we developed. We first start off by asking, can anyone tell me what prioritizing information means? I know it's a kind of a big word.
Deciding what's most important first.
Thank you. Exactly. So to prioritize something means to treat it as more important than other things. So examples, you can prioritize things you need to get done at work or home by making a list and putting the most important or urgent tasks at the top. Mine is always laundry, which always seems to fall to the bottom, but anyway. So prioritizing information means to look at a bunch of information and decide which is most important. People can also prioritize tasks or things that they need to get done. And this is sometimes referred to as making a to-do list. This can help keep you organized both in work and in life. So looking at the second half of the information on page 2, why do you think that prioritizing information would be important when you're trying to get help with a legal problem specifically? Any ideas?
You have to know what area they're dealing with in law.
That's one, for sure. So part of the context is that when, especially if people are looking for help from a community agency or a community legal clinic, they often turn up and think it's a free service and I kind of have unlimited time to speak about my problem, but unfortunately that's not actually the case. And as you can appreciate, people are very pressed for time and have a very limited amount of time to spend with clients. So the more organized a person can be about understanding what their legal problem is about and can relate it to the lawyer or the legal worker, the better level of help I would say they get, if that's fair to say. And also on the flip side, if you've got a problem where you need to pay money to a lawyer, time is money. So the private lawyer will probably be quite happy to let you speak for half an hour or an hour about your situation, but you're going to get a bill at the end. So if the person's in a position where they need to get paid assistance, it's important to kind of prepare in advance and be as pithy as possible when describing the problem so that they don't end up spending a ton of money. Also, and you'll be aware of the effects of stress on the ability to retain information. So when you're stressed out because you've got a legal problem or you find the issue confusing, it can really be hard to remember the types of things you need to tell the person who's helping you. So just organizing it, making a list and saying, okay, this is what happened when, and that can be very, very helpful. And finally, as a corollary, prioritizing information can make sure that you tell the helper everything that they need to know about your situation and not to leave out important information that may change the advice that they give you. So now I would like to ask you to look at the small group activity on page 3 briefly. I'm now wondering if I think most of you put down some information for these exercises. Can we spend a few minutes maybe you suggesting to me answers to the questions on page 3 that you looked at? So first off, in what other ways do you think that prioritizing information can help you? Monica.
We were thinking that it gives people a feel of being more in control of a situation.
That's a really good point. Yes?
Another way, if you're making your list and writing it down, you can recall information easily, especially when you're, might be talking to other people or agencies. You can keep it straight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really important point. There can be a lot of moving parts to these problems as well, and so, or as I said before, with intersecting issues, it's hard to keep track of what's going on where. Yes?
It gives you a bit of foresight, and sometimes you can get a better idea of the total picture, see how things link in together. And in our area of work, it helps us to delegate maybe. Rather than just taking on every task, we can say, oh, well, maybe so-and-so could do this.
Mm-hmm.
So
Perfect.
Foresight, insight.
Yes.
Save time.
Okay. Great, thank you. So the second question was, have you had to prioritize information in the past? If so, how did you approach this and what did you do? Did anyone have any really creative thoughts about that? I'm kind of a linear thinker myself, so.
Yes, we were pretty much make a list.
So, and myself, like, if I'm receiving information beforehand, I like to have it prioritized as well, and also just to let the interpreters know ahead of time so I can give them preparation.
Sometimes too, it helps to brainstorm if you're not sure of when the sequence of doing something or the timeliness of doing something.
You can ask other people for some input too, if you're, if they've had a similar experience, and not that you have to follow through, but it helps to hear other people and what they've experienced.
Very good. So, and finally, maybe this is a bit personal, so you don't have to answer if you don't want to, but does anyone have an example of a time when something might have gone more smoothly in work or life if you had been able to prioritize information?
Just a couple of weeks ago,
Okay.
I was going to a dog show, and I did not check to see if my brand new crates and all my luggage and dog food and everything would fit in its place, because I bought new crates. So it set us back. We didn't know if we were going to make it, but in the morning, there I was putting the Thule on top of my SUV because I wasn't going to.
Oh, wow.
So, lesson learned.
That's a really good example.
Car the night before. Just saying, ladies.
Well, that's a very interesting example, actually. I'm sure I would never have thought of that.
Mine's kind of, or ours are sort of the same lines as hers, getting your materials ready ahead of time instead of the day of.
And I have this is an example, preparing to make sure everything's ready, if we're building a house. So making sure we have the correct wood and everything, and then we were missing, one kind of screw that we need. So then you have to go buy it, and the next day you have to start the project. So yeah, very similar, preparing ahead of time.
I actually have an example related to the session. The reason these sentence strips are so raggedy is because I forgot to do them at the office where we have the guillotine. And I found myself an hour before I had to leave to take the train, with the doll scissors at home. So, and I thought I was eminently prepared, but that's the one piece I forgot. So it's always possible to forget things, and we need to lighten up on ourselves, but important at least to try to capture what you need on paper if you can, and especially when you're dealing with a legal problem. So I thought I would lead you, you've given me great feedback, thank you. I thought I would lead you through one more exercise, which is called Tracy's Story, and it's on page 4. So one piece of perspective about these stories, and you may see some of the other ones if you review other kits. The instructors I worked with really liked my stories. My boss was like, they're way too long. So these reflect the way too long instruction and editing. Some of these stories were far more convoluted in future, or in past. So the story we were about to read is about someone who's trying to deal with a problem at work. When you're reading the story, start to think about what pieces of the story are most important for Tracy to tell a legal worker. Also think about the time sequence in which things happen to Tracy. I will be asking you to organize points about her story in chronological order, and that's what the sentence strips are for. If you want to use them, it's a bit more fun. Or you can just write it down on the worksheet on page 5. Now, I was hoping I could have some volunteers to help me read this story. I can start off with the first paragraph. Tracy was upset when she got home from her job at Widgets Inc., a big manufacturer in Etobicoke. Was it really possible that next Friday would be her last day of work? Her employer had told her that she was being laid off because there were fewer work orders than before. She was confused because just 2 weeks ago at the staff meeting, he had talked about hiring more staff because some new work orders were coming in. He had even asked her after the staff meeting whether she could recommend anyone. It didn't make sense. Next paragraph.
Tracy couldn't prove it, but she suspected that she was being laid off because she told the employer that she was pregnant last week. Her wife,
Spirula. I'm Greek. I had to stick a Greek name in there.
had suggested waiting until she was showing to tell her employer, but Tracy decided it was right to tell him, thinking it would give him lots of time to find someone to replace her. She had been at Widgets Inc. for almost 10 years, and people there felt more like a big community of friends than co-workers. She had never dreamed that something like this would happen.
Next paragraph.
Tracy Ann Spirula?
Yeah,
How do I say that?
Spirula, yes. Spirula.
Spirula. Tracy Ann Spirula discussed Tracy's layoff over dinner that night. Spirula felt that Tracy should get some legal help. She encouraged Tracy to sit down right away and document anything and everything that had happened at work that might relate to her situation.
Tracy pulled out the folder she used to keep track of her hours and keep all her pay stubs together. She took a fresh piece of paper and wrote down as much as she could remember about the conversation she'd had with her employer earlier that day when he told her she was being laid off. She added the date and time of the conversation.
She checked her calendar and wrote the date she had told her boss she was pregnant. Then she remembered that one of her co-workers, Josephine, had walked by when she was telling her boss about the pregnancy. So she made a note to call Josephine and see if she had overheard the conversation. She wasn't sure if that would help, but she wrote it down anyway.
And I can finish off from there. Thank you. For as long as she had been with the company, she couldn't remember a work shortage ever being mentioned. She made note of that too and decided to ask some coworkers about it. A few days later, Tracy bumped into another coworker in the cafeteria, Ali. Ali told her that he was really sorry to hear that she was going to lose her job. He also said that the employer had just advertised her position. When Tracy heard that, she knew that she had to get some legal help. She organized her papers and called the Workers' Action Center at 416-531-0778 to see if they could help her or refer her to someone who could. Just a couple notes about, first, the Workers' Action Center, although it's a Toronto phone number, they will speak to anyone across the province. So that's that might be a number you wish to keep in the back of your brain, or it'll be on one of the referral sheets I gave you in your colored folders.
Do they have a 1-800 number?
They don't. They just speak to, they're actually funded by the City of Toronto, but they will speak to people if they call. And also in that circumstance, Tracy would probably want to contact the Human Rights Legal Support Center, and they're, because that, you know, that situation flags a human rights issue of discrimination on the basis of family status. And that information is also in your package. So now I'd ask you to maybe spend 10 minutes or so, whether by yourselves or within the group, working with the sentence strips. Okay, so I'm curious to know, I would love some constructive or positive, any kind of feedback you have on that exercise. How did you find doing it? How do you think your learners would respond to it? I know it's one of the more challenging exercises that we've posed in these kits, I believe. Any feedback?
I think it's a really great exercise for having learners identify, you know, the steps in prioritizing what they need to be doing. I found it a little bit challenging.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it would be a very good exercise.
I think it's good for sequencing and to ensure there's comprehension there too.
I was wondering if, because there were, again, not a lot of moving parts so much, a lot of different players in that story, and I don't know if it would be advisable to remove one of the people that she spoke to, or, you know, I'm just not sure. We had positive but mixed feedback from our instructors that we worked with on this in terms of the the level.
I would suggest leaving all the players in only because this is our learners' stories. And when they come to us, there's way more characters in any of their stories.
Yeah.
That this is actually a simplified version.
Yeah, I think it's all in the presentation of the story. You're not going to do it just as a reading exercise. There's going to be some type of activity before that, and maybe some role playing and all that kind of stuff. What I find really interesting was the idea of deciding to do something and actually doing it. I like that part, okay? Because we find that sometimes that's the difficult part, to get them to actually do what they're thinking of doing. So I thought that was interesting, and I know that Chantal and I discussed that part there and saying, oh, okay, so that comes first, and then, yeah.
It's very interesting you say that, because my boss's feedback on that piece was, but do they actually ever do anything? And that's, I think at the very least, some people do things, and it's a good thing to model, as you're suggesting, because and I'm well familiar, it's very hard to act on these problems.
It scared me when I read it because I'm from Etobicoke and I once worked in a widget factory.
Oh no!
And I white things for war.
For real. Maybe I was channeling you when I wrote this exercise.
Is there anywhere where we can find out what your themes are for these kids?
Like all the different types of kits that you have?
Sure.
Or that they're planning on having?
You know what? Yeah, I went through it in my, and that's the stupid thing. I didn't make another thing I forgot. I didn't make a list of the kits. I told you one, but that doesn't mean that you will have it. So there will be 6 in total. Okay. So the 2 you have here.
You said you were going to email us. Did you just add the list in there?
Of course, in the cover email. The other topics are putting things in writing, documenting, keeping documents and records, which doesn't involve a fancy filing system, and how to find good legal information online. Oh, and sorry, then the last one I'm still working on is dealing with difficult questions that arise in an interview or at the workplace.
Do you have any of these in printed material? Because I know I have pamphlets, printed material in my room from your organization. But is there a place where we can order some and, or is everything online?
No, in terms of ordering print material on the legal, like the laws that affects workers, I have included in that, if you take that fancy envelope, well, it doesn't look like that, the brightly colored folder, I've included a copy of our catalog, and you can order by telephone, and they will send you print versions, and that's free.
Perfect, thank you. So I've got some of these in my room already.
So I realize we're ending a bit early. I don't know if you want to do another exercise or if you want to go for lunch early. Is that a good question? The last activity in this kit is note-taking, based on that.
I just have a question.
Yes.
Suppose they want to go see a lawyer and go through that process. If they don't understand the literature that's given to them, and signing contracts or any kind of legal documentation, should they be hiring someone specific, a specialized worker, or, you know, if their literacy skills and, you know, how lawyers, they use such big words and the jargon is very specific, and if they really don't understand what they're reading, is there some kind of assistance that they can call upon to help them?
In the legal community?
Yeah. 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 You know, if we refer them to go see a lawyer and they have to go through some kind of legal process, and there they encounter some kind of documentation that they have to read.
Yep.
They don't understand it, and it requires their signature on these documents. Is there someone specific that we can call upon, maybe an interpreter? Or should we go with them? Or what do you recommend we should do in these situations?
That's a really good question and a really hard one to answer. If the problem is connected to like the work of a community legal clinic, which they do poverty law such as landlord-tenant, social assistance, some workers' rights, some immigration, the workers there and even lawyers are pretty skilled at talking to people in the language that they understand. They get training in that. If it's more of a private issue, the best recommendation I can make would be either to try to get at least a family member or friend who has better literacy skills to go with them, or perhaps get in touch with a community agency who can send somebody. It's a big challenge, and there are a lot of gaps in that field in terms of one-on-one assistance.
Thank you.
So I guess I had one question for the group as well, and you don't have to answer this right in the moment. You can always email me if you'd like. My card is in the front of your envelope kit there. Based on what you've learned so far, do you have ideas for any other topics along these lines that would be of interest to learners?
Have you considered doing anything on immigration? Refugee status, all that kind of stuff?
Yes, that's one thought we've had. Housing is another obvious one, but I think immigration, given at least the people I work with in Toronto, the demographic is highly newcomer, and I imagine it's the same. I don't know to what extent across Eastern Ontario and smaller centres that's the case, but obviously across Ontario, many people will be newcomers in these courses. So the immigration one would be important. We do also develop some content on immigration issues that's available on our Steps to Justice website, which just went live earlier this year. The content in French will be uploaded by the end of the year. They had some problems with securing translation, but there is also, I believe, some other immigration resources online, in print, in French. Yes?
Have you found out identity theft? Not uncommon for
Oh, that's a really,
cousins or something.
that's actually a really good thought. I hadn't thought about that, and that would probably make a nice discrete sort of kit on what to avoid scams. Yes?
On identity theft and scams and that on the internet, we have one of the community police come in and discuss it with a group.
Oh, really?
So I'm sure other communities have the same thing where the officer or the constable can come in and do his thing, and then he's there to answer questions anybody might have.
Oh, that'd be great. And where's your...
We're in Smiths Falls.
Smiths Falls, okay. Oh, and actually, I did want to mention in connection with these kits that one of the things we're trying to organize over the next few months is, because this isn't substantive information, we want to try to be able to put you in touch with your community legal clinic to ask them maybe to come into your classroom and give a short workshop on the actual law.
If they have time.
If they have time. But they are, recently over the last couple of years, these organizations, they've received some extra funding, and so a lot more are starting to be able to go out into the community more than they have been to date with that extra money.
What about literacy assessments for ODSP appeals?
Oh, that's interesting, yeah.
Yes, I get those. We used to do them there at our center. Even the legal center has no one to do it. So that's needed.
Definitely. Yes?
What about any info on criminal records and also on hiring and disabilities?
Okay, so the last kit I'm currently still finalizing, and it's with a lawyer for editing, is will contain a piece on criminal records and other things they can and can't ask about. And sorry, hiring people with disabilities, that's also another possibility for sure. And then, like, in fact, that next kit on inappropriate questions will cover off on some of that, a bit of that as well, because obviously some questions will relate to disability.
What about like a financial aid and that sort of thing, like people who are doing their taxes, but I know that like sometimes people, they might not do their taxes for many years, and then they want to do their taxes. What kind of legal advice to give someone like that, where to send them if that's the case?
That's actually a really interesting question. I wouldn't say it's within our area of expertise. I could certainly look into who might deal with that. I do think there are community-based tax programs. I don't know whether they help a person go back several years, which obviously there's a big need.
Yeah.
I've been that person before in my life. Filing 5 years at a time.
What about wills and estates, power of attorney, especially at a level that our students are oftentimes functioning?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Going back to Louise's point about the immigration, I have a case where when they, and I don't want to sound offensive or biased against any culture, but when some families come to this country and the rules from there are not the rules from over here, and I have a case where there's a woman who is in serious need of, she's with an abusive husband, basically by our rules. So is there a kit on how to empower the protection a woman has in this country versus points of origin? And again, I don't want to sound offensive or against any particular group, but the rules are different or the cultural norms are different.
But you could just kind of label that rights of women and not deem it to be cultural?
It's a little bit deeper than that in some cases, than just the right to vote.
We do have materials generally on the rights of women in abusive situations. I'm not,
Crossing that line, because it's a very fine, delicate line.
it's a delicate line. It'll be a line that CLEO probably won't address. I believe there are other agencies that do address that line, and I can certainly look into what's out there for you.
Thank you.
You mentioned you're doing one on disability rights. Have you considered adding a section if the employee isn't the one who's disabled, if it's, you know, potentially a husband or a child or a parent, and they have,
Yes, because that also comes under the Human Rights Code, family status, and the ability to take time off work to deal with a loved one's problem.
you do rights there, but I often have clients who will lose a job because they don't want to address it with their employer.
Of course, yeah.
I don't know if doing something on unemployment insurance, like what are their options, obligations, insurance? I know it's a big thing, but it's a worrisome thing sometimes.
CLEO does produce information on employment insurance, so you might want to look at our resources. Again, you can either order those in print or have a look at one of our websites, and they will send print like brochures to you free of charge. We produce information on about I think it's 10 different areas of law right now. So I would encourage you to have a look on the CLEO website, or like I provide you with a catalog. So you'll see all the titles, and you're always free to contact the general CLEO people if you have, for myself, if you have suggestions for future publications, because we rely a lot on hearing from people on the ground. We're all in an office in downtown Toronto. We do have contacts on the outside, but none of us practice right now. So it's important to hear about new trends, or things that may have changed.
On the contact info, very often it has like bit.ly/whatever. Is that a website?
What those are shortened. In order to produce that document, I had to use what's called a link shortener. People most often use that for Twitter, for example, so that you don't have a big long cleo.on.ca/landlord tenant/. So it's easier if I were to email you a copy of that document with the PDF, then you could actually click directly on those links. So I'm happy to send that out.
If we didn't have that, if you couldn't just go like www.bit.
Yeah, you could type that in. Yeah.
You could type it.
Yeah, but it's not ideal. We didn't have space on that sheet to add the full links. I myself have a problem jumbling numbers and letters, so it's not ideal for me. But if you want the PDF with actual active links, then that might be easiest.